Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we return to a theme that is gaining public awareness and which we have been very preoccupied by over the last 18 months or so on Humanity Rising. And that is the ongoing momentum of extraterrestrial disclosure called unidentified anomalous phenomena, but the essence of which is the incontrovertible evidence that is emerging that we are not alone and that extraterrestrial beings and advanced civilizations have been on planet Earth for some time. And there is evidence of contact, retrieved craft, retrieved biologics, as they're called. And this whole momentum toward disclosure, if you've been watching it as closely as I know many of you have been, took a step forward with the recent interviews by a gentleman named Jake Barber. First, with Ross Coulthart on News Nation and his program, Reality Check, and then subsequent interviews, both by Ross and also Jesse Michaels on his podcast, where really, for the first time, the public has been given the opportunity to hear the testimony, essentially, of someone who's had direct contact. And this has been what everyone has been wanting for many, many years. I've mentioned before that the disclosure movement really began in December of 2017 with the New York Times running a front page article basically stating that the US government and the Department of Defense knows that this is taking place. And that started a momentum in the US Congress that led to multiple hearings. The December 2017 articles were prompted by Lou Elizondo, who had a very high level security clearance. And then in July of 2023, David Grush, also a senior intelligence official, testified before Congress. And like Lou has said then and subsequently in his book, Imminent, they're here. However, neither Lou Elizondo or David Grush had personal experience with an ET or with an alien craft. And the work that many of us have been doing here in Washington is to try to get the Congress to hold the hearings with people who've had a direct experience. They touched it, they saw it. So far, we haven't been able to do that for reasons known only in the bowels of the military industrial complex that are resisting it. But the witness now of Jake Barber, which I encourage all of you to Google or look on YouTube, these are all publicly available, is basically with someone who was working as a private contractor for various private corporations and government agencies as a helicopter pilot that was retrieving alien craft. And in that process had extraordinary, mind-changing, life-transforming experiences with the extraterrestrials themselves that basically altered his categories of cognition and his perception of who he needed to be in the world and transformed him into a crusader for disclosure. But he did so with such skill that his new company, Skywatcher, is now officially working with the DoD and other three-letter agencies to retrieve unidentified anomalous phenomena. And what he's asserting and has been filmed, and you can see it, is that they're not only able to retrieve these craft, they're able to communicate with the extraterrestrials in the craft and get the craft to land. It's called psionics. So we're now getting closer and closer to public disclosure at a level of reality that will leave no doubt even to the greatest skeptics. And this is what we're working on in Ubiquity's ET studies program, is how do we, as ordinary people, learn the remote viewing and the mental telepathy skills to have direct, intelligible communication with extraterrestrials. It's an extraordinary moment in human history. And our ET Studies program is on the vanguard of making that happen in a way that ordinary people can establish contact with these beings and begin what we're calling ET citizen diplomacy. Just imagine if thousands and millions, maybe billions of humans were directly in contact with extraterrestrials. The world would completely change. And that's what we're working toward. So it's in this spirit that I want to welcome Susan Manewich, who I've had the real privilege of getting to know over the past year or so through Humanity Rising and the work that we've been doing in Washington on disclosure. She has an extraordinary pedigree. She is not only an experiencer and has had a lifelong interaction with these beings, but she's a scientist and professor, has taught in leading universities on emotional intelligence and intuitive intelligence. She's written a number of books, one Beyond UFOs, The Science and Consciousness of Contact, another book on Tesla and the kind of energy that he was bringing to bear. She's now doing a PhD dissertation on the energetic impact of the sun on Earth ecology and human consciousness. And so she's going to come in now. Welcome, Susan, and tell us a little bit about her story. She's also going to provide a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation. And at the close of that, I'll circle back and we'll dialogue for the balance of the time. But Susan, this is very exciting. I can hardly wait for what you're going to present to us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. I very much appreciate the space being here today. Before I show my screen, I just want to say that I asked Jim if I could do this probably about a month and a half ago. I said, you know, I'm really feeling a need with so much that's been going on with the mainstream media and semi-alternative media in regards to this disclosure process. I said, you know, I really need to do this. I need to step up to the plate here and share in a way that I haven't shared before. So that's what this is. And before I get into it, you know, the last presentation I did was regarding the solar flare, solar energy relating to our consciousness and health. And I just want to say the last 2 days, there have been a lot of high level M-class flares. So I wonder how all of you are feeling out there today. But you know, we haven't had much activity up until like the last 48 hours. It's really come, you know, kind of like ramping in here. So I hope everybody's doing okay. It's always a great time, you know, to move energy around that has been stuck. So with that being said, I am going to share my screen and hopefully everybody can see it. If you can't see it, then somebody needs to message me and let me know. But otherwise, I'm gonna get started here. So I have a little bit of I've come to realize, you know, I think when you come on, when you come into this planet, you don't realize you're different until, things happen, and then other things happen, and then you start to think that you're in a group of people that have something similar to you, and then you realize that's not the case. So that's why I titled it this, because I thought these were some of the things that made what I have been connected to, what I am a part of, different. The conscious incarnation, the ET contact experiences, and lo and behold, the military interference. And this is the first time I am um, this is the first time I am doing a presentation on this. I've actually given talks for years. Since 2005 was the first time I did it. My daughter was about 3 years old. I remember specifically where I was because I was so nervous. But it was one of the first times I had given a talk on anything in regards to my contact. So I've been doing this for a long time, but never in a way that I'm sharing a lot more with you. Let's put it this way. And some of it may be a little emotional and some of it may be a little charged. I try to do my best to be as specific as possible, um, and to not, I never over embellish anything. If anything, what I've done is probably under spoke about things. I guess maybe there's a bit of when you come in consciously, there's a bit of humility that comes into play that, I think is kind of baked in the cake there. So I'm going to start off with the conscious incarnation. What does that even mean? So I'm one of these people that remembers what it was like before I incarnated to my mother's womb. There was no hypnosis. I just innately remembered this. And by the way, I grew up in I call it very normal family. I'm the youngest of five in my family. I was born in 1971. And like I said, I didn't know that what I experienced was unusual, but I want to share that because I think some subsequent things that I'd say will begin to make more sense. And especially with what you are hearing in regarding to this whole disclosure piece. I mean, how do we determine what's real and true, or what's most true for us if we don't have something to maybe compare it to in a bit of a different way? So I'll share what I remember before incarnating in. Um, I remember that I was fused with, I would call it I'll call it a celestial being. And I'm not a fan of AI, but I did use it because I said, well, how do you find two conjoin like stellar objects as they're at the point of separation? One is male and one is female. So that's what I created this to be able to illustrate that. That's how it looked to me. I didn't have all that, supercharged color attached, but that's how it looked. I remember, if you can see the pink there, that would be me, my spirit essence pulling away from this other, and I don't want to say being, but it was like a stellar cosmic connection. It wasn't source itself. Source was there, but it wasn't entirely, source that I was pulling away from. So I want to share that piece. But I was connected with this other energy. I very much felt what, you could call positive or a negative, a proton, a neutron, or sorry, a proton, electron. That should say electron. But I was pulling my female essence. I remember that, and I remember at that point of separation, that is what I felt. Call it feminine, not female, feminine. And I remember a super high level of excitement of knowing that I was going somewhere. That I was selected isn't maybe the right word, but there was this ultimate charge of energy to um, be awakened, to come to a different place, to go to a different place, to be needed on behalf of God source. And that was a massive level of excitement. I mean, I can't even share with you what that excitement looked like. It was just completely off the chart. And the next thing that I remember seeing was these golden pot of beings. These golden beings, they literally move faster than the speed of light. They had, what I call a humanoid shape form, and they moved faster than the speed of light, and they were getting their um, um, information, directions. They were reading source and knowing what they needed to do and where they needed to go. And they moved faster than the speed of light, and then they just took off. And I knew that I was part of that. I knew that I was connected to that. Um, and then the next thing is I was in this, it felt like it was circular, with these other beings that were around. And the next thing I know, I'm doing this. I knew that I needed to leave and I needed to go. So I did. Don't remember the actual part of going, like leaving where I was to go, but it was like literally through, some type of it's almost like you dropped from, God into space and, started moving. It sounds silly, but that's what I recall. And as I was incarnating in, and my energy was, it was going super fast. It was like, faster than the speed of light. And I remember hearing, as the energy that I was began to slow down, your job is to understand how they live on this planet. And so that I make a joke and say those are my original instructions, right? I've been quite the observer of a number of different things, um, because of that. But that's one of the things I remember. So how it felt was, it felt like this. And again, this is the AI image. And no, I don't remember seeing myself look incredibly whatever this female looks like, or this man. I left that in there, but it was more like, this positive, negative, this proton electron type of charge. So I said, this is how it felt. It's not how it looks, but that is in essence how it felt. Um, and as I was incarnating in, and as I told you, I had those original instructions, I began to feel everything slow down at that point. Um, no, I didn't know I was going to Earth. I just knew I was super excited, as I said, to be going on this super incredible journey. And then it had something meaningful to do with the creator. I think that's probably what got me the most excited. Um, and then, like I said, I could feel form. I slowed down, like through the galaxy, the solar system, into the Earth's atmosphere. Then the next thing I remember after that was being energy in the corner of my parents' bedroom while they were on the bed. So, and you'd say, well, how do you know it was them? I mean, you just know. Sorry, you just do. But I was like this kind of globule, loose form of energy at that point, in that corner, in the upper right hand corner of my parents' bedroom. And no, I don't remember the actual point of going in. The next memory that I have, and again, this was all natural. I came in with this. It wasn't, there's no hypnosis or anything that like, it's all natural memory. And as a side note, I used to tell my brothers and my sister, I said, I remember where I came from, and I remember being in mom's belly. So that was like always the joke, like I was a weirdo because, who is this little kid saying this? And I was like 8 years younger than the youngest sibling, at the time. So I remember hearing, and that's why I have this picture of this baby in utero with the ear, because I remember hearing and putting my ear up against my mother's belly as I'm in her belly. I know that she's standing in the kitchen. I can hear all this chaos. Like, again, I've got three older brothers and an older sister at the time. And I knew my mother was standing in the kitchen. And the next thing I know is I go, oh no, not this place again. And I literally rolled my eyes in utero, like, oh God, no, not this place again. Because instantly I had this awareness and this knowing of the density of the human condition. It had nothing to do with Earth itself, but it was the density of the human condition, the repetitive negative action and consequences. I knew it, I felt it. And it was like, I guess coming, now into that form more fully. Um, as I'm in utero, I'm now picking up, those differences between light and matter, between being light, and being material. And it was challenging. It was very, very challenging. But I remember laughing in utero, like, okay, well, this is just what it is right now. Of course, I didn't know exactly where I was going when I got the call to come, but that's what it is. Um, and I don't remember being born, but my mother said I was so easy of a birth, she could have dropped me in a field. So, if that means anything, not entirely sure. But, people have said to me, they said, well, why did you incarnate in with the parents that you did or with this and that? And I said, the only thing I can tell you, is my dad said to me, he said, you were made with a lot of love. He said, your mother really wanted you. And he said, and I knew how serious she was. And I thought to myself, oh my God, we don't have enough space in this house. Like, we can't have another kid. Like, and he said, your mother really wanted you so bad. And he said, you were just made with a lot of love. So I share that because I do think, it's now of what we know about conscious conceptions, right, on behalf of the parents. I don't know if my parents were so conscious of just the fact that they loved each other so much, and they loved me, and I felt that, and that has been a huge blessing as well. So I hope that makes somewhat of a difference with what I'm sharing. So now on to the contact experiences. So this is not AI. This is uh, a picture artist rendition of the beings that I have been connected to since I was a kid. And that was done. I used to live in Hawaii, and the backdrop is Hawaii. So that was done for me, gosh, probably around like 2013, 2014. So this is the pot, like a pot of nine beings. They're illuminated, and I'll share a little bit more about that. And I will say this, I'm trying to just hit the highlights. Obviously, I can't share everything, but I'm trying to hit highlights that I think is most important as one thing relates to another thing. Um, so the very first experience I had, and keep in mind, it kind of goes back to this density a bit with the first experience, is I'm probably about 1, maybe 2 years old. And I remember standing in my den and I could feel the density again, almost like I was being pulled through the floor. And I remember getting really scared. And I remember calling out for help. And I reached up to the sky, like it felt like I was reaching up to the sky. My hand felt like it was enormous. Probably it was probably only like that big, right? Um, as you're 1.5, 2 years old. And what all I can describe is very large, very loving, a soft cloud with multiple like pinks, red, blues, greens, white, and just super enveloped of this feeling of love, this lightness, this connection. And, I could say it's Jesus, maybe it wasn't. Our family wasn't very religious, so it wasn't coming from anything there. It was just this great presence that felt like Jesus. But I'm not again saying it was. But I just knew at that point I'm gonna be okay here because this energy came in and helped me be lighter. So that I would say was my first experience when, people always say, well, when did you see the ETs? And I'm like, well, how about let's really get to the level of accuracy of all of this here, because it's not just about the ETs. And I want this to be something that everybody actually walks away with understanding and knowing, because I think that's really important, because there's differences with what contact is for each person. I've done a lot of research, but at the same time, those differences, I think now, as this conversation's on the table, is really important to understand what is actually, happening to some of us and why some of us are here and what's this about. So the first contact experience that I recall clearly, because I'm sure I've had others, was probably about when I was like 4 or 5 years old. I'm laying in bed. We had bunk beds. My sister had the top bunk. I had the bottom, and she's about 10 years older than I am. And the next thing I know is, I'll just say right off the bat, it was this primordial knowing. My cells were awakened. They're vibrating this magnetic pull. It's almost like, just this awakening of all of me. I'm no longer this little 5-year-old kid, 4-year-old kid. I'm now like, boom, back into, um, a real high state of consciousness. I can actually say that now. So the connection, the lightship was there. And it was a light ship. And my sister said to me, she went to the window and she goes, "Oh my God, Susie, what is it?" So she saw it as well. The energy was very strong. It was very intense. And there was a lot of energy that was moving through my body. It wasn't incredibly uncomfortable, but it was different. And my one of my first thoughts um, was, this is the first time in this human body, meaning as a 4 or 5 year old girl living on planet Earth during this time period, that I'm feeling this. Isn't this interesting? Because I have felt this in other lifetimes before. And the energy on the planet is different electromagnetically. It's different at certain, when you think about it, we're never in the same exact region of space as we were in different lifetimes or different periods of time. So that was something that I immediately knew and recognized and actually said, "Ooh, this feels funky." This doesn't feel as fluid and lucid as it did in other lifetimes. Ooh, this feels a little funky. And again, that was an immediate like knowing, immediate primordial knowing. Um, and some of the things that happened during that time, because there's so many different interactions with the ship and the beings, and they came in a quick short period of time, multiple times, up until a certain point. So I had an interaction with a light being. It was standing in my kitchen, and I say light being, but it was able to. And there was other ones that were there. They were all working when they were in my house. My sister was there. My dad was there. Some My dad, he passed away, but he would vacillate between knowing and not knowing. He's just certain things he wanted to address and certain things he didn't. Um, but the light being, when they would move, and so you see them illuminated in this picture, when they would move in group mind and group think. It was just a shared space. Imagine like the ultimate collaboration with one another. And when they wouldn't be in collaboration, then they would separate and have form. They would have more form, and they would have a little bit more material matter. And one of them touched my hand, and it was just very soft, powdery um, exchange. And my entire body had just this incredible feeling of love come over it. And I remember that to this day because it was so wonderful. And even though I had a lot of love for my mom and dad and my family, this was different. It was literally as if like my body had become activated, like embodying this, what I call like universal love without any interference, just very clear, very warm, very universal, very loving. And for some reason, that touch was really important. So the touch was a part of, I think, why the being there. Um, and I say here is they also needed to move really fast. They were sampling the food, the water, the air, and I got a sense they were very concerned. Now, again, keep in mind, this is probably about 1975, 1976. So they were working really quick to assess the environment. And I also got the sense that it wasn't safe for them to be there. That's why they work so quick. It was very efficient, to say the least. And somehow I was in two places at once in one of these experiences where I'm looking at the being, but I'm also like up in the ship. And, this, call it bilocation, whatever you want to call it, just, a shared consciousness. That's something that I've processed a lot. But, I just look at it this way, and, that there's a oneness that I have with these beings also. And I kind of look at it as simply as that. Um, So another time, something that may be important to share is that I was outside playing as like a 5-year-old with my mud pies. I've shared this story before, and I love the feeling of dirt and have my hands in nature. And I remember one time I see the ship and I see them and know that it's time to go. It's time to have our interaction. And I said, leave me alone. I'm just a little kid playing with mud pies. And telepathically I hear, Susan, we know you're not just a little girl. And I'm like, oh. So, it was this bobbling back and forth between, I'd say, incarnating in, keeping that consciousness aware, intact, that higher consciousness, that clear consciousness, and not falling into, oh, I'm just a little kid here, and that was important, and that, is like, that thing. I think that piece is important. Okay, deep breath to now share the next piece here. So at about 1979, it could have been 78, it could have been 79, I don't entirely remember. You see this car, and then you see, what do you see over here in the upper right-hand corner? So um, I had a lot of contact as a kid, obviously, and then I didn't have it for a couple of years. And when I'm sitting in my classroom at about, I think it was like first or second grade, I end up experiencing a very destabilizing um, frequency, which it never had with any of my contact, by the way. And I end up feeling extremely nauseous. I end up feeling really sweaty and hot, and it's trouble. It's the only way I can describe it. I just felt like trouble. And I was scared because I don't know what's going on. I feel extremely destabilized. Probably the best way to describe it, as I look back, would be like, if you have a whale or a dolphin and they're experiencing like a horrendous frequency and it just totally destabilizes them. That's what happened to me. Um, and I ended up going to the nurse's office, and I was at a smaller elementary school. Back then, it was just the secretary, the principal, and the nurse. And when I went to go down the hallway, none of the lights were on. And I went to open up the door to the nurse's office, that was locked. And then I had to go around to the secretary's office, and she was there. Um, and she was on the phone, and she looked panic stricken for whatever reason. And I'm sure I had given her my name and was just hoping I could get, because back then they would give you these little orange pills to, they're like a baby aspirin, which tasted good. When you were a kid, it's kind of like water and baby aspirin. That was just, what they always gave you. And I'm thinking, okay, I just need some of that, and I just need to sit down, and then, I'll be okay. And the next thing I know is she says, I'm going to call your parents to take you home. And then she says, well, a couple minutes later, she's again still on the phone, and looks just completely frazzled, confused, and chaotic. And she says, okay, wait outside because someone from the school is going to take you home. Okay, so keep in mind that would never happen today. You'd never wait outside by yourself. But in the 70s, lots of weird things happened. So I end up waiting outside. I'm scared because I know something is going on here. I have no idea what it is. I mean, you got to understand at that point in my life, it was butterflies, sunshine, my mother, my father, my animals. Life was good. Like there was no reason to have fear. And all of a sudden, I start feeling something that I actually never felt in my body, and I started to have fear. Um, so this man pulls up in the car that looks similar to this. It's not exactly the same one. I really tried to get one that looks exactly the same, but it's close, the wood paneling. And I go to get in the front seat intentionally, and he says, no, sit in the back. So I go and sit in the back, not wanting to do that. And as I'm sorry, sit in the front, not wanting to do that. And I immediately move all of my energy and my life force up against the door as far as I can to get away from this guy, because I know this is not good. And before we've even left the parking lot to the school, he says to me, he says, you see those beings in those ships too? You see those beings in those ships too? And all I feel is just a complete like blackness in my body from absolute fear. And and the next thing that comes into my mind, literally, it is my higher self speaking to me. And as if a mother is going to tell a child, do not cross the street, do not go across the street, you will get hurt if you do this. So I hear, don't say a word, don't say a word, do not let them know who you are. And I'm thinking, well, am I right? Like basically, do not let them know anything about that I have anything to do with ships and I have anything to do with these beings. You do not say a word. So there's that piece. Now, I've been very careful and cautious to share details of what I remembered happened afterwards. I had always had these pieces of this, and it wasn't until I moved back home to my hometown, after being away for 20 years, um, the memories were all there. They just strung together. And I trust a natural timing of events. I trust the body will release when it's supposed to. But I was drugged. I was pulled off to this a side road, then drugged, and then brought to an underground facility where I was strapped to a chair and witnessed a very heinous act of an innocent being. And I'll leave it at that. So, a couple things are important here. Um, the a couple things are important here. The technology. Let me pop ahead here. Um, yeah, the technology. I'll get to that in a second. So so I wrote an article a couple years ago. It's called "What's So Dangerous About the Light?" Because this is the light. This is the light. As far as I can see and as far as I can tell. So what was so dangerous that about me and what I'm connected to that caused such a ruckus and that would cause a group of people to do what they did? And so these are questions I have been asking for a long time. And it's uncomfortable because I go about my life as, I try to be a regular person in lots of different ways. But so anyways, so this is me as a child. Imagine if this was your kid. Imagine if this was you, right? Or a loved one. I mean, the innocence of a child, number one, and to do something that well coordinated. I mean, we have to ask these questions. In my opinion, disclosure is absolutely critical to understand what has been done to human beings who have contact in the name of what? National security, in the name of what? Technology. I mean, this is a violation of human sovereignty. It's a violation of a great many number of things. And obviously, what we know now about things like MK Ultra and, psychological operations and culture shaping and social influencing and social engineering and the technology that's gone along with it. I don't think until we actually address this, we're getting to a root cause or a root issue here. And that's been my experience since. So a couple of key points here. This was really well orchestrated. It was well planned and timed out what happened to me. And who does something like that? Well, Intel does that. I mean, that's what we're looking at. Whoever had me had psychic training. That man never looked at me. He wouldn't look at me, and that is something that I was able when I was in the car to actually forecast and know what he was doing. And I won't get into the details of that now, but I did. It was almost like this automatic thing came in, and I knew what to do. Um, I want to share a little story about Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell, I talked to in 2009. He was Apollo 14 astronaut that went to the moon. He started IONS, wonderful human being. I shared with him my story as I was driving him back from a conference in Maine to Boston Logan Airport. And I told him the story. And the first thing he said to me, I mean, I was so nervous telling him it, but he goes, Susan, they've had that technology for a really long time. And I never forgot that. So I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, even I remember I said to him, I said, well, Edgar, this was like in the late 70s. Are you sure? And he said, oh, no, they've had that for a long time. So, my husband and I, we are researchers, and we were looking at some released FOIA requests and was able to find out that starting in 1959, there was advanced satellite imagery. Again, really started. The first satellite, by the way, launched into space in 1958. So it was about like missile warnings, observation system, a jointly by Space Systems Command and the CIA. They were able to take pictures and beam it down to the crew, like ground crew, almost immediately. And these satellites were SAMOS, SAMOS, Corona, Gambit. And guess where those pictures were processed? They were processed at an Air Force base near my house, which is where I thought it was taken. It's not a smoking gun, folks, but at the same time, I say when people go, oh, we don't know what these ships are. We don't know what's there. I disagree. I think that is actually a lie. I think they very much know what they are. I think that they've known what they were for a long time. And by the way, those photographs back then were better than Google Earth that you see today. So, I think that this is something that's been going on a long time. And, my sense is there are very dark forces in people who want to stop these connections, almost like an ethnic cleansing, or at least, want to be able to distort these. Um, and I do say this because as I got older, I spent time with Dr. Mack at Harvard. He was doing research with people that I contact. And, I've been working in the free energy arena a little bit over a decade. And, I would say this for every legitimate contactee, there seems to be surveillance, infiltration, and incredible interference. I mean, for every one contactee is like there's three intel people that seem to be constantly like, you know, there in some capacity. And for some reason, the light ship connection, and I say mine was a light ship because I watch it go from light to matter. And I watch the beings go from light to matter. That seems to be a greater attractor with that Intel community. For whatever reason, it is. And I mean, common sense is like, oh my God, what is it actually doing? And so I don't find people that have and high level skills of remote viewing or things like that, even though they're very talented and wonderful intuition and incredible beings. It seems like that attractor of having access to that is something that has really attracted that Intel community. And my sense is too, it was never really about the technology, it's about the consciousness, the whole person in connection with their higher self. Because I don't think I would have witnessed that heinous act. They would have done that if it had anything to do with technology specifically. I think it had to do with um, people in coming into beings coming in and incarnating, yes, as children, as babies, and growing into adults that had their consciousness and their memories intact. For some reason, I think that's quite a threat. And another key point on here is it is not something I enjoy, but I do think it's my duty to bring those who did this to light and to justice. And that is why I wanted to do this today because um, it's not something that gets told. I think if I wasn't born with my consciousness intact, if I didn't incarnate with that line of connection, I don't think I would probably be doing so well today with what I experienced as a kid, because there was a little bit more interference after that when I was a child. Not a ton, but enough to let me know that they were there watching the military intel piece. So I'd like to shift and move that. And I'm checking my time here to make sure I'm okay. So from about 22 to 42, this is why I want to say it's not all about the ET piece. That's just a part of it. It's, we overemphasize it a little bit too much, if you ask me. There's other streams of universal energy that enter in. So from about 22 to 42, I had my past life memories emerge one by one over these 20 years. And meeting people in life during these major milestones. And, for me, it was to balance out these schisms that occurred. And most of my past life memories have to do with big transitions on the planet. So I seem to come when there's transition, which is, I think, why I'm here now. I have seen creator beings. I've worked with Dr. Rudy Shield, who's a Harvard astrophysicist. I started working with him. He worked with John Mack, because what I was shown from these creator beings, literally taken out into space, shown cosmologically what is happening and going on, that the scientists have our Big Bang wrong, and that we are in this obviously this great planetary shift right now. And it's not just Earth, but it is universal wide. And that is what I was shown over the course of 20 years. They came back a couple of different times, but that started when I was 22. And I've seen, and again, all natural, this stuff just happens. Agartha, the floating yogis, that was about teachings and premonitions from the inner earth. It also had to do with bringing in a child. Tibetan Buddhism, that has been, and again, it's not something I sought out. This all came in energy form first, and then, there was a material afterwards. Right speech, right mind, pure heart action, and also say a Hopi, fully illuminated being, and so much around that as well. So I think, like a lot of us who have some access to these different realms, there's certain things that come along with it. So I was always saying, planetary wide, these cosmic changes. We have, from a technical standpoint, the waning magnetosphere. You're going to see more light ships because of that. Mother Earth is preparing for her evolution. You've seen it with the Hopi cultures, the different indigenous cultures. There's similar things are being said. With a waning magnetosphere, you also have cosmic rays and radiation, and it does mean that things will get colder. From a geopolitical standpoint, electrical grids will be compromised. And there's also a grasping that's at play with the Earth's resources being sought after. I think that's, geopolitically, one of the things that there's an isness right now. And these world leaders do know this. Most of them do know this, especially those countries who've been long intact, like China, for example, Russia. I think they're well aware of these planetary changes. So Earth's resources are a really big deal right now, because of that. And I think that it's not just about domination of one thing or the other. You're talking about survival through some big shifts and big challenges that are going on. Electromagnetically, which is also going to affect things like the capacity to grow crops, etc. So it's an exciting time to be alive, but at the same time, there's others that view it very differently in terms of how things roll and flow, in terms of what they do. But individually, what does this mean, these planetary changes? I've written, if you can go to my Substack, and that's all free for you to get to, electromagnetic neurogenetic. What I was shown from these creator beings is that all the energy in the universe is condensing, and people say it's expanding. Well, one of what I saw was, and what they were showing me, that it was condensing, and in that condensement, people are regaining their memories back of different lives lived, whether it be on Earth or elsewhere or multitude. So there's this compression that's actually happening and occurring in order for this birthing process to take place. So there's that piece, and that's very challenging, hard, and destabilizing for people if they don't understand the bigger picture here. And but one of the things that we can see is, from a research standpoint, is that it will impact stress related to our systems that we have. Cancer rates increased anxiety, depression, nervous system, hormonal, immunological impacts as well, with this waning magnetosphere, this lower like EMF type of frequency. You have the solar activity fluctuations as well that go along with that. And there's a lot that we still don't understand yet. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing some research, is to try to, best understand that. And so again, I don't look at this as being something that is, so detrimental, even though, some of it does look that way. This move towards higher consciousness, which I'm sharing with you now, and I'm going to wrap up in a minute, Jim. I know I'm going a little bit over here. Is from the book Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact. Whenever I get a chance to do a presentation, I like to put this in because I call it unadulterated good research that didn't have any hands from Intel. And it was pure. And this is from the book Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact. So this was from it was about 4,000 people that participated in a survey over a period of a number of years. They were asked questions, a long format. And so when asked about, so this was just the one area that I did. And by the way, there was about 10 other PhD collaborators on this. So this was not just done by me. And a lot of those PhD researchers are contactees, so we knew what to ask. But I like this information because I think it's pretty pure. So looking at, okay, so what's the nature of contact? Well, they're teaching about the nature of the universe. Consciousness education. I'm sorry, this got cut off a little bit. My apologies. Ship navigation, creation, earth healing, looking at the future Earth, the changes that are coming with the Earth, equation formulas, device creation, accurate history of the planet, looking at some medical, some biological, and how to take energy and intention to actually influence matter. So a lot of this consciousness education training, and by the way, this came out in 2018 and this research started in like 2014, and it was kicked off by Dr. Rudy Shield and Dr. Edgar Mitchell, with Ray Hernandez really championing the entire thing. And then the purpose of this, so what's the purpose of contact? What is the purpose of these beings coming? Well, again, these earth changes, look at that, just keeps, popping more and more and more. No one is saying be more fearful. No one is saying, trust in XYZ. They're saying, no, increase your vibration, increase your love, increase your calmness, increase your intelligence, help others awaken. Understand how how we work the craft, understand that the universe is a living system, have gratitude. I mean, this is what I experienced from that being as a child, and this is what others are saying here as well. So my final thought, and thanks for hanging out and listening this entire time, I appreciate it, that there's been my life, when I've been asked to participate in certain things, um, by, I would say, some high level people, there's a negation of the positive contact. My information has been completely left out with the positive contact or the incarnation memories and the military interference. It's just, and what I see afterwards is either my story is left out, the information is left out. It's just the negative information, the clickbait stuff that's put forth, and that's from really high level people. And dare I say, maybe some of the people that you mentioned a little bit earlier, there, Jim, or some of those folks that they're connected to. So I've been at this a long time. Suppression and control versus empowerment and sovereignty. Everything I know about this awakening process is that empowerment and is that sovereignty. The military isn't in charge of this shift. You are, along with these natural forces. They're not they're not in charge of disclosure as well. That's you, that's me. We've come to this planet to learn our sovereignty and to free ourselves out of this very long slavery to awaken to our primordial essence. To heal our ancestral wounds and to be in alignment with the earth and cosmos during this planetary shift. The Hopi prophecy talks about natural alignment versus the technological, and it's, I used AI doing this presentation, some of it, so I'm aware of it. The cosmos is going through a massive shift where it's literally waiting for creators to assume their position, and that's you. And what I was shown with this compression and this expansion was the birth of a new universe. And it may sound silly or weird. It took me 15 years to be okay with saying it. And that's what I work with Dr. Rudy Shield on is, when you look at how much control is exhibited on our planet and how, I mean, just even in your day-to-day life, how many people try to control what you're doing. It's like, oh, for the love of God. Um, and then you see it at this big kind of organizational, systemic, and governmental way, at least has been. You say to yourself, but that's not how the cosmos works, folks. Like, that is not how it works. There's so much space for creator beings. Like, why are we doing this with one another? And that's what I saw. So when you actually see how large and how alive and how dynamic our universe is, and we are creator beings with this. It seems silly to ever try to attempt to control anybody. It's very limited thinking. And Earth is a school, and we're seeing right now, if you ask me, some are just better creators than others right now. And that doesn't mean that you're not here to do that as well. And I say last 4 points here is not all contact and contactees are the same. We are what we are connected. And so I want to share that because someone who's had negative contact, that's important for them to look at what's there and maybe what is up with their lineage and what's up with what's happening. And same thing, and whether we call it positive or negative, I look at it, there's an isness there, and whatever you attribute to it is what you're attributing to it. And I've learned this through those streams of the Tibetan Buddhism that came in through the astral when I was young. And by the way, all of that ended up manifesting in the physical. Just story for a different day, but um, um, to focus exclusively on contact and not have these other variables that are incredibly important to what makes us human living on planet Earth is very limited. And when you think of, that's why I have the tree of life here, because this tree of life is this natural evolution. And it's all these different aspects that come into play, and that diversity for our growth here to understand what contact even means I think is critical. For me personally, it's one of the reasons I never say, oh, and I'm not criticizing anybody that does this. I'm being very honest. I'd never try to summon a ship. Have people that I know and love and care about who have asked to see something when we are together. Do they see something? Yes. But it's not uh, I, I wouldn't treat an animal like that. Why would I do something like that to an intelligent being? So, I think it has to do with the why and the how. And I look at it more like plasma sentience, that there's an interplay and an agreement and a respect for every bit of life force, no matter how small. No summoning, no control. But the trees have to agree, the ether has to agree. It's not just the ship, and the ether is alive, the trees are alive, the grass is alive, the clouds. I mean, it's all alive. So there needs to be this agreement that comes into play that is respectful. And lastly, I may have come in with some, pretty unique awareness, but I've still have had to work really hard to grow and evolve, as we all do. So, last thing I'll say is, it's it's all of us with these pieces and parts. There's pieces and parts that other people have that I don't have. And what I'm sharing with you today is the pieces and parts that I have to help maybe fill some of those pieces in. So I hope that wasn't too long, and I hope it was thorough for you. And I'm sure you probably have some other questions, but thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Boy, Susan, that was a tour de force. I'm not sure where to begin,
Sorry.
but what I was struck by, just to dive into the middle, I was struck by your slide from your book about the extraordinary spectrum of topics
Mm.
that the ETs are communicating to various humans about. I've known, as I think many of us do, and we've had a number of people talk about the fact that they've warned about our use of nuclear weapons. They've warned about our ecological devastation. But I think you're so right. Uh, they've been communicating the full spectrum
Mhm.
of human domains that require us to refine our attitudes and behavior to enter into this new age that the earth and the universe are now moving into. Is that
Yeah.
essentially get to what you were trying to communicate?
100%. I mean, I read this, I still look at this book all the time. It's a heavy one, but yeah, because I mean that's what they're basically saying is, and I look at it, simply as say, okay, electromagnetically everything's changing because it's like too much of a focus on the density is going to be an issue. Too much of a focus on that materialism is going to be an issue for where we're moving and where we're going, energetically. So it's like kind of like lighten the load within yourself in order to be able to navigate and move through. But the morality piece has to be there. The love has to be there. The clarity within the self has to be there. And, I think we're experiencing that now, that there's days that if we're not so good within ourselves, there's days that that rumble is really intense.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I'll speak for myself, but I mean, and people I know. So, my sense is we're going to be getting a lot, a lot more of those rumbles. So why it's important to be conscious of your feelings, your thoughts, your behavior, your actions, and what you are actually manifesting in your life. Like that is the consciousness education training was riddled throughout that book.
It's extraordinary because what you're offering for us to contemplate is the simultaneity between sort of the Earth and maybe our local quadrant of the galaxy going through a
Mm,
change. And yet we humans with climate change and ecological
yeah.
despoilation are going in the opposite direction. So it's as if we're an anvil and there's these cosmic forces and human forces that are pulling us in opposite directions. And somehow the ETs have shown up to guide us toward the right path before we do some irreparable damage to ourselves. Would that be consistent with
Yeah.
your understanding?
Yes, yes, and what I've seen too is there's no you have to do this or you have to do that. There's free will. Here's the deal, like there's free will here. I think that the planet is going to do what she's going to do. She is just part of this natural,
Yeah,
she's part of this natural
yeah.
um cosmic force, right? That's merging and moving. And my sense is what, again, with my experience, and it's just my sense, it doesn't mean like it's the grand truth, it's just mine, um, is that it's if the earth is not, if we on the earth are not stable, then we're gonna have the hard time.
Yes.
So
There you go.
so
There you go. Yeah.
yeah, that
Yes.
and if some
We're
of
the
the
ones that are getting more and more destabilized, not the planet.
Not necessarily. I mean,
Yeah.
there's things that we
Yeah.
can do to heal
Yeah. Yeah.
certain places, and you'll see that too with the research. Is people said, to heal, like their job is to heal certain places on the planet. And that's where you've got these. I mean, I've done it myself. Like, okay, I've got to go to here, got to go there. Like, you get called to these places to rebalance something that's out of whack, or you help maybe protect a part of the woods that are getting destroyed. Whatever. The point is that there's a rebalancing, but overall it's us that can flip off that ride real easily. And if I can be so bold as to say, one of the things I've been shown, and this does go back to Dolores Cannon. I mean, I was clearly shown that you can ride above the density, because not everyone's gonna want to pop out of that density, they're gonna stay there, but for those that maybe choose that more dense route, things are going to be really challenging, and if you can manage to rise above the fray, in those subtle energies, and those subtle energies are where you can be and where you are, you're not going to be as grossly impacted by some of the other things. And how is that feasible? I don't entirely know technically,
Right.
but
Right.
the two Earths are something that come to mind as well. And maybe it happens with a big solar flash. I'm not entirely sure, but it's important to just keep growing and evolving your intuition and your heart and your morality.
Yeah. Well, and that I want to draw just on the research you're doing with the sun, because we're terrestrial beings and we think of Gaia, but Gaia is part of a solar system revolving around this extraordinary star. And your doctoral research is really looking at how the solar electromagnetic and the flares and the cycles and so forth and so on are impacting other planets in the solar system, but including human behavior, attitudes, thoughts, and emotions. Expand on that.
Yeah, well, I worked with the creators of emotional intelligence. That was my day job, and it was incredible. I learned a lot. But what I learned is, um, when you look at all this research, like, well, how can a human being get to that if they can't get out of if they can't get out of their emotional state? Maybe that's preventing them from doing something good, wonderful XYZ, or they can't understand where the emotion came from, so what I'm and then you say to yourself, well, what is impacting that? And what I started to get the sense many years ago was that um, people are more impacted by these solar energies than they realize. And especially with this waning magnetosphere that we have, it seems like technically there's more cosmic rays that come in, more radiation. So you'll have that. That's like the technical kind of research. But there's something that's happening to human beings that is a stressor on them. And that stressor can be a good thing, right? And sometimes it's not a good thing if it's not managed well. So, my thought process is, geez, if we can do what we did for people with emotional intelligence, but do that with solar, call it solar intelligence, to teach people to move with and these undulations that are occurring, because the sun is the giver of life on the planet. Without the sun, and if that sun is going to shift and change, if because what's slated from what we can see is, we're going to have some big changes, and if that is dimming, or that magnetosphere wanes more, you know we are going to have to rapidly evolve, because life as we know it is not going to be the same. So, the philosophy is, maybe we can help people understand, hey, it's not just you, this will pass. Hey, when this lull that we have, when we get another flare, like, you may feel better. Conversely, maybe it will help you calm down. But if we can get people to understand that they are much more impacted by these solar events, which is what I'm seeing over and over and over, because I can see it with the people around me. They may not be aware of it, but once you have made that awareness clear, then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, it's the sun, it's this, it's that, and they can begin to differentiate. The other part of that is, then you can determine what is natural versus man-made, because we know that there's interferences electromagnetically. We know that there's interferences frequency-wise. I felt it as a kid, um, experienced it. It wasn't pleasant. So, like, if we can help people even begin to differentiate some of these things, it's like I think that this is where we're also going. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. And as you know, there's a long body of work going back to the Russian astronomer Alexander Shishevsky on the impact on history and on human affairs by solar flares and the sun cycle and so forth. So your research to further amplify this is really important. And I want to dwell on this and just to get your sense on it, because you know whether it's Beethoven or Mozart or Tesla, they'll often say essentially the same thing, that they're just kind of going along, minding their own business, and an idea comes right into their consciousness.
Hmm.
And whether it's a equation or a musical sonata or what, and there's a growing awareness that this didn't come out of their own psyche, but it came from an external source like the sun and and other planetary systems. That's the whole basis of astrology. that these massive planets out there and the sun are actually influencing in terms of the energetic matrix that is created and ever changing uh,
Hmm.
as they change is affecting microsecond by microsecond all of life, not just human life,
Right.
and that it's actually discernible. That's the whole basis of
Yeah.
astrology. Now, the piece I want to add to this is something I was listening earlier today to an interview with Courtney Brown, the remote viewer and the founder of the Farsight Institute. And he was saying that in addition to cosmic forces, the ETs have the capacity to put thoughts in people's minds in the same way. So when you start to take that in, the sovereignty that you're encouraging us to develop gets diluted a little bit because our sovereignty is very
Yeah.
porous to
Yes.
cosmic influences and
Yes, yes,
extraterrestrial
yes.
messages. So just comment on this phenomenon
Oh
as
no,
you
I love what you said. Thank you for saying that. I love that. So when I when I say when I say sovereignty, I probably should explain it. I think what I mean by that, well, I know what I mean by that is not letting, because in this day-to-day world, media, for example, like there's so much
oh boy,
conditioning,
yeah.
there's so much programming. That's what I mean. Excuse me for not being clear on that. Um, so you have that piece, and I can, for myself, I look at when you say like an ET gave you something, I can, at least with my contact and my experiences, I've always seen a differentiation of myself, the self of me, and I don't mean ego, I just mean the spirit, the energy of me, and whatever I'm connected to. That there may be a connection, but it's still me with another, right? And you might have a shared space, and it may be a really close shared space, but there's still a difference in the individuation of a being. Does that make sense? But yeah, I mean the collaboration, that's what I see when you're sharing what you shared about this type of information. I look at it as collaboration because, yeah, I'll just simply say that I look at it as collaboration, and maybe it's a very lovely, highly connected collaboration. But again, I think it's how I came in. I came in with that I was conjoined, and then there was this individuation, and that individuation has remained. And so I share it that way. Again, I hope that makes sense. And I hope I answered your question.
No, I like that. That this isn't just an impingement on our sovereignty. It's a collaboration with our sovereignty.
Yes,
I mean,
100%.
Beethoven had to write the sonata, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes,
he could have let go of the idea and it would have been either gone forever or it entered into the psyche of another composer down the street.
yeah,
But this notion of the Greeks and the Romans that genius isn't something that's indigenous to us, it's a visitation of the gods, is the
yeah,
way they understood it. And it can come and it can also go.
yeah.
And our sovereignty therefore remains intact, but it becomes open to collaboration in the invisible realms outside ourselves.
Yes, yes. Well said. I absolutely. And if I can share something else, I hope this
Sure.
connects. It popped in. Where did it pop in from? Um,
Aha.
when I was so one of the experiences where I was taken and shown this new universe, these two creator beings, one was to my left and one was to my right. This was over a period of about 10 to 15 years. Um, the second time they left me. They left me there. So they took me, right? Rudy Shield calls it a conscious quantum highway. And they left me there. And I'm like, you can't leave me here. What are you doing? Like, how am I going to get back? I mean, like, this was what was going through my mind. And it was like, the great teachers are not going to just give you anything, right? Like they may drop a little, But then it's up to
Good.
you to be
It's up to
able
you.
to,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
that's what I've experienced, multiple times with them. And I would say they're really great teachers from that, because they're not just giving. I mean, when I was a kid, I was like, can you just give me the answers to the test? Because I had so much contact. Elementary school, and I was terrible all the time because I was like, well, everything else just comes. How come this is not coming? It's like,
Right.
when I got to college, I'm like, oh, I had to learn to work your brain. I'm serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, a
I
little
was
bit of
even waiting for that moment where I could put a French book under my pillow at night and wake up speaking French.
exactly. Sometimes it works,
Not
sometimes
so
it
easy,
doesn't.
buddy. Not so easy.
Right. Right. Exactly. But you bring up a great point. And those delineations I think are important.
Well, let me ask you this. This is going back full circle to your research on the UFO communications. One of the major cosmic questions that's up for humanity as we are not alone becomes incontrovertibly true in our minds is who are these people? Who are these beings? And are they benign or are they malevolent? And so I want to just put it to you as someone who's had your own experience and you've talked to a lot of experiencers, you've done research. How would you answer the question of who is it that we're dealing with here and
Yeah.
what is their motivation?
Well, I'll speak from a couple of points. The first, from my personal experience, is I would not have known if I didn't have my pre-incarnation memory intact. I wouldn't have known when I first felt that feeling of that ship coming in and the beings coming at like 3 a.m. in the morning. I immediately knew what that was without seeing anything. So that was that primordial knowing. So obviously, I'm not going to look at it as being as being a threat. It was more like, oh, here's my physical family, and there's my energetic family that I experienced prior to incarnating. So it was just like, the thread wove through. So um that, and I have, and the only reason why I will use the word ET, which I sometimes even feel funny and I'll say light being, is because I had a ship. And when my stuff relates much more to the Vedic scripture than it does anything else. And again, I didn't know this when I was younger. I had no clue. So it relates more to that. Even what I recall with the before I incarnated in with the other cosmic force that I was connected to, this negative positive charge, right? That connects much more to Vedic and to some of the ancient Egyptian stuff. Again, you learn this stuff as you get older. I did not know it at the time. So there's that piece. The only time I have had anything negative was obviously that military interference. I was horribly negative and very, when I was a kid, obviously it was scary. Um, so there's that piece. But I've done regression hypnosis with people. I did it for about 5 years out of my home. I did not find anybody having any ET contact that was scary, that was negative, that was malevolent. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist because I know it does. But in the book Beyond UFOs, you've got about 10 to, I think it's about 12% of the people did have some quote unquote scary contact. So what does that mean? Obviously that needs to get pursued more. And some of those contacts they actually felt were military induced and not necessarily a, malevolent being. So, that's something to keep in mind. I do know that, some of the information that's perpetuated out there, you just like with some of that negative contact, that's for each person to pursue and clear out whatever may be happening or going on within them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's their fault or what have you, but there's a reason that's happening. And it's important to try to understand what those roots are. The last thing I'll say is one of the things Dolores Cannon used to say was that people that viewed some of this contact negatively, once they were able to get to a deeper state of hypnosis, they
Mm.
were actually able to understand it because they just couldn't at the time. So you just wonder when that higher consciousness really comes in and begins to understand X, Y, or Z, Maybe, there's a strengthening of that sovereignty, there's a strengthening of that soul or that spirit that is being asked to come into play.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the second book that John Mack wrote on Passport to the Cosmos, where he makes
Mhm.
essentially the point that you just made, that of the 10, 12% that reported traumatic experiences, on deeper reflection and experience, they came to realize that what was the most traumatic was not the experience, but the reception that they got when they tried to go back to their families, friends, and community,
Yeah.
and the challenge that that experience made on their very conventional categories of cognition.
Yeah.
That was what was the most traumatic, is the way their psyches were exploded and their worldview was transformed, not the actual experience itself. Although I'm sure there was a certain percentage with some of the abductions and the experimentations and so forth,
Sure.
where that was also true. But I
Yeah.
think that's very comforting that that of the vast number of experiences and people who've had experiences, it's only a relatively small percentage
Yeah.
that have experiences that they would consider to be
Yeah.
terrifying or traumatic.
Yeah, and that is in this book right here, that it would have come out, it would have been shown, it would have come
Mhm,
through, and
mhm.
the people would have um that would have been there, and it wasn't. And again, I'm an empath, so I care if somebody had something negative, of course, but that dominating the number of experiences, it's not there in the research, at least not in this what I call pure research, unadulterated research.
Yeah. Now let's just final question, then we'll adjourn to the after chat. And that I'd like you to parse um, as concisely as you can this distinction between emotional intelligence, intuitive intelligence, and plasma intelligence, because I think there's a lot of confusion as to how you really connect with these beings. And some people do it more emotionally, and some people are more conceptual, some people are more artistically, some people are more verbal. But as you've understood these distinctions, how would you parse them? And what is it that you think, I think most importantly, about plasma intelligence that allows you the kind of communication that I think all of us are beginning to realize we need to make?
Okay, I'll answer the last part first because that's what I can remember, and I'm afraid I'm going to forget the other. So, the plasma intelligence, so that's come over the last 10 years. So, my contact has changed. They're great teachers, like I said. And so, my contact has changed where it's obviously two-way, and sometimes yes, I'm directing it. I don't sit there and go, oh, I really want to see them, or it's not like that. And I also know that there's a safety issue. I don't want them coming all the time because I don't want the attention. And I mean that wholeheartedly, from I mean, the military has lots of different ways to see what's going on. So, anyways, the plasma intelligence, like I said, has come over the last decade because it's been a great teacher to see that the trees have to be in agreement, the ether around it has to be in agreement, that um,
I see.
the land, the geography has to be in agreement. It is an agreement, and that's the respect of the life force. And I shared that in my presentation. The days of being forcing are over. That
I,
forceful energy, that control, dominate is over. And so this is the teaching and this is the lesson. Um, and let me give you one example. So when I was, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I'm divorced. So, I mean, I'm remarried, but I'm divorced. And, I have a daughter and I share my daughter with her dad. And, there was a moment that I was like, kind of not feeling that lovely energy. And then I was doing something, I don't know, maybe like an hour later, and I came across a picture of myself, my ex husband, and my daughter, when she was little. And I felt this feeling in my heart of union and connection, because obviously that's how she was made. Was in that union and that connection, my daughter. And the next thing I know, I feel this impulse to go outside, and it's like 7 o'clock on a winter night here in New England. And there I look up in the sky. There's the ship. And that's the
Mm,
teaching. That's the lesson of that unification in your heart, not to have that split, right? And this is what they're trying to teach us. This is what they're, I'm still human. I may have all this knowledge, in advance, but I'm still human condition. So that's part of that teaching. That's the plasma intelligence, that there's this agreement with
mm,
a person, the ether, the clouds, like all of it. And so I've been seeing that more and more over the last like 10 years is the every respect for every bit of life force, because it's all in participation. It's not just ETs come and influence space-time and boom, here you see XYZ. It's more beautiful. It's more of a symphony than that.
mm. It's a symphony. And
Yeah.
to call in the orbs, you need to call it, you need to be aware of the harmony
Yes.
of the whole conscious cosmos, really. Uh,
Yes.
and from the trees to the
Yes.
clouds to the birds to the bees.
Yes, that's my experience with
Yeah,
what I've experienced, what
that's
I've
beautiful.
to.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful.
And thank you, because I think it is as well. And that's what I've, as you get older, you appreciate what they're trying to teach, how you're trying to
Yeah.
understand it, and oh, this. The difference between, I would say really quickly, between emotional intelligence, intuitive intelligence, and plasma intelligence is the emotional intelligence is your emotion, right? Like how you feel, good, bad, happy, sad, angry, loving, what have you. And it's more of like or it's more tied to those major kind of like six senses that you have, not your sixth sense, but your six senses that you have, right? It's five senses, excuse me, that it's tied to that. And you can understand where the emotion came from. You understand what triggered it, and you can manage it. You can shift it, to have it be productive or not be productive. That's what makes it intelligent, is the conscious use of that emotion. um, and intuitive intelligence is different. It's not going to typically arise from a trigger in your environment. It's going to be something it's more internal. It's typically going to be defy space time a bit, because it could be precognitive, right? Like I'll just give you for example. I flew in the day before to Ronald Reagan Airport on that same exact flight path going in, and I had a very clear I won't get into I'm always careful like saying anything too negative, but I had the plane crash, the bodies and the cold water, and right as we were going, so that there's intuitive intelligence there, right? And you can say that wasn't coming from, I wasn't fearful at that moment flying. It had nothing to do with that. That was separate. That was something that was different. And intuitive intelligence is also guiding you to do something that's usually pretty big, whatever it is. But it's coming in advance enough for you to be typically more discerning, or for you to take greater action, or for you to teach or do XYZ, because there's more space that's involved in that. And it's typically it's super non-local. So where emotional intelligence is more local. It doesn't always have to be, but it is. And you said make it short. So in plasma intelligence, like I'm sharing, is really looking at that micro scale. They call it the microvita of those different life
Mm,
forces, and having that respect and
mhm,
having that appreciation for it on that real subtle form. And I just keep going back to respect for the life force, because I worked in free energy for over a decade plus, and it was manipulation and not all the inventors, the really good ones, didn't do that, but it was a manipulation of energy, right? Like we just do this and we extract that. And it's like, but that's still life force. And this is what we miss. Like we
mm.
miss that part. We miss that aspect. And I do think too, I'm going to be bold as to say this, because I think we got 1 minute left. And that's the disclosure piece I think misses hand over fist is there's not a respect for this life force. We
Oh,
chop it down to mechanistic and technology and this or that, but just take a look at the Hopi prophecy as it relates to the earth shifting, and the technology is not where it's all at. It's the consciousness first. The technology is a sub part of all of that.
brilliant, 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 brilliant. That's so insightful and it's so simple that what we are destroying is actually as alive as we are.
Yes.
The fact that the planet hasn't struck back long before now is a measure of her compassion and
I think
infinite
so.
mercy.
Because I think it was like 782,000 years ago that we had the last planetary, magnetic pole shift. I mean, like we're so overdue. Like she's been so good to us. Seriously. Seriously. I agree.
Well, Susan, this has been just very profound and deeply informative to our audience. And so I really want to thank you. And I want to say, everyone, that Susan's one of our upcoming faculty in our ET Studies program, because this is the kind of thing we want our students and all of you to begin to learn is, what I've called the mother tongue. How do we begin to communicate with other sentient beings within a worldview where everything is conscious and everything is interconnected? So the plasma intelligence that Susan's referring to is really the mother tongue. It's really the way life, it's the operating system for life. And somehow humanity went left when it should have gone right. And we're trying to find our way back. And Susan is one of those people who've been doing that. So, Susan, thank you so, so much. You can join Susan in the after chat. She'll be there for a bit. You'll see the link in the chat box. And you receive the link in the Zoom reminder for today. But Susan, thank you. Thank you so, so much. All right, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks
Jim.
for
I really
everything.
appreciate it. And by the way, just a side note, I hope, thank you everybody. I was trying to write in the chat, but I think I missed it. I hope to see some of these messages in the chat because I don't want to miss them. So thank you
Yeah.
everybody and thank you, Jim, for giving me the space today.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone.